All right, here's the dreaded blue screen. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about what I consider the danger zone. And Kenny Loggins did the soundtrack for Top Gun, and he said it best, and this is part of the lyrics. The highway to the danger zone. And so what I'm saying here is that we've got a department called the Austin Code Compliance Department. And the director, Carl Smart, is allowing young inspectors to go out there, dresses them up similar to a police officer with a badge, puts them in a uniform, allows them to use the term officer, go out and go onto people's properties and basically make things up because they're not properly trained. So today I'm going to talk to you about Mr. Ross Dickens. I've never met the man. I've only had 2 experiences with him. We're going to go over both of those, and I'm going to show you just how dangerous it is to allow an inexperienced, uneducated, as far as the law goes, city employee onto your property and the ramifications that can come from that. All right, I don't have a picture of Mr. Ross Thomas Dickens, but we do know that he works for the code department. We went ahead and an older list has him as a code inspector trainee, okay? So he's not even a regular code inspector. He's somebody who's basically a cadet. Imagine if we had a bunch of police cadets that walked around and presented themselves as police officers before they finished their training and started going out and running police calls. This is exactly what we have going on here. I did a check of his Texas Department of Health certification. As of January the 10th of 2016, he is still a registered code enforcement officer in training. The effective date was June the 2nd of 15. So that's when he started, as far as the state goes, his training. He's a relatively new employee. And so from here, let's check his LinkedIn page and see how he's presenting himself to the public. Doesn't have a Facebook page, but Ross Dickens is referring to himself as a code enforcement officer at the city of Austin. Not a code enforcement officer and trainee, not a code inspector trainee. He's telling everybody he's a code enforcement officer. Again, background, city label, city logo, code enforcement officer. He's part of a group, Code Officials of America. So this guy is before he's got his full training, he is out there presenting himself as a code enforcement officer. My first experience with Mr. Dickens was when I turned in a piece of property highlighted in blue here, you see. It is 901 East 5th Street. It is a large piece of property that is owned by Capital Metro. It is one of 4 that I turned in, and you'll see that it's bounded on the north by 5th, on the south by 4th, to the east, San Marcos Street, and Brushy Street to the west. I turned this property in because there was dumping going on this property. And so here is the code compliance case log when everything was said and done. I obtained a copy through Open Records, and you can clearly see that it is for Capital Metro. It is 901 East 5th Street, the same piece of property I showed you before. And the complaint I turned in was Capital Metro lot on the southern portion of the lot at 901 East 5th Street. There's a large area of trash consisting of ceramic electrical inductors, rubber insulators, and just trash that appears to have been dumped on this site. Initially, it was sent to Troy Collins and then transferred to Ross Dickens on April 20th of 2015. Again, he's a code inspector trainee, but they gave him this to go in and to take a look at. And he said, upon arrival, I found no signs of illegal dumping at 901 East 5th Street. Photos taken and placed into the case file. Should have seemed like a pretty simple thing to do. Let's take a look at his case photos. Now again, I'm asking somebody to investigate the southern portion of lot at the lot at 901 East 5th Street. Now, I had turned in all 4 of these lots. If you're familiar with Austin, this is the interstate to screen left, and this is 901 East 5th Street here. You can see the dark staining and some of the trash that's right here. This is where the dump site was. Ross Dickinson's photos are everything here in green. He started off over here by the billboard, shot a picture here, a picture here, a picture here, and then and this isn't even the right lot. He was supposed to check out the southern half of the lot at 901 East 5th Street. He was supposed to be looking here, but he took photos here. He did take a series of photos here, and then he wandered into the next lot over this way. He didn't even know how to determine which property he was supposed to be looking at. And even if he did, he went to the north part of the lot instead of the southern part of the lot. Let's take a look at the photos. Okay, you can see down here at the bottom of the screen, it says Tuesday, April 28th, he was on site. It says Code Officer Ross Dickens. His title is that of a Code Inspector trainee. He's not even a code officer with the state yet, here in January, but this is back of April of last year. He says this is 901 East 5th Street, but this is actually the lot next to it. And you can see that he's taking photos, and you can see all the trash and debris scattered around, but he claims there's no, again, more trash and debris. He'll tell you there are no violations on this lot. This is an illegal parking lot that's being run by Capital Metro. Here's his code enforcement vehicle right here. And so you can see all the litter and trash in here, but yet he's saying there's no violations here. The concrete that's been dumped here. And again, along the railroad tracks, you can see the litter. This is the north side of the lot, not the south side. And then he takes some photos over here, and then he gets another picture of looking back toward the interstate and starts walking back again. You can see all the litter and trash along here, but keep in mind, this is Capital Metropolitan. This is a business partner for the city of Austin, and that's like suing yourself. So why would we send somebody, one of our business partners, a notice that they've got buckets and trash and all kinds of stuff on their property? So he just simply closed the case. That's my first experience with Ross. So I talked about the danger zone. A municipality can create ordinances and adopt codes like the International Property Maintenance Code. And that's a book that's written for municipalities all over the United States. And so what they do is they say, well, we like this part, but we don't like this part. And oh, by the way, we want to add things to the code. And so that's what happened here. 25-12-213 is the Land Development Code for the City of Austin. You can see the sources for when these ordinances passed here. And the city manager shall designate a code official. The code official shall have the authority to designate one or more deputy code officials. And so Carl Smart is the director of code compliance. At some point, he is given the authority to run a division, and then it trickles down to the rookies like Ross, who will go out and do things. Inspections. The code official shall make all of the required inspections. The inspection shall be in writing and be certified by a responsible officer of such approved agency or by the responsible individual. Notice of violation. The code official shall serve a notice of violation or order in accordance with applicable requirements of state law and city code requiring the notice of order. So here's where we can start getting some problems here. Prosecution of a violation. Any person failing to comply with a provision, requirement, or prohibition of this code or any notice of violation or order served in accordance with Section 107 shall be deemed guilty of a misdemeanor or civil infraction. So, what this is saying is that if a code inspector gives you a notice of violation and you fail to comply with the provision of that notice of violation, before you step foot in a court of law, you shall be deemed guilty of a misdemeanor infraction. You're not innocent until you're proven guilty. And so that talks about 107, and here's 107 here. Notice to person responsible. Whenever the code official determines that there has been a violation of this code or has grounds to believe that a violation has occurred. So somebody can come up and say, you know what, I think you're guilty, without even understanding the codes, sends you a notice, and if you don't comply with that notice within the time frame, you're automatically guilty, and they can start racking up the charges. And then here it starts about transfer of ownership. You cannot sell the house, you cannot rent the house, you can't do anything unless you tell that person, oh, by the way, the code guy came by and we have a disagreement about what's going on, but don't worry about it. And oh, by the way, I have to give your name to the code department, because if I don't, then I'm in violation of the code again. These are city ordinances. I think they conflict strongly with state law and the Constitution. So this is one of the things we have to challenge. And let me show you why we have to challenge this. Because we've got inexperienced people that are writing people up for things that just don't make sense. So this is a notice of violation, one that you would get from the Austin Code Department. You would get this in the mail after they very much put a stake in your front yard, and they'll have their lights on, and all your neighbors will come out wondering what's going on. So this is an official document. This is something that they send to you. If you don't comply with this, they're going to drag you into court. And so this was for a man at 3606 Grant Street. The first thing we come up is says it's zoned as PNP. That's wrong. It's not zoned as PNP. Let me show you. This is the house in question right here, 3606 Grant Street. It is zoned single family 3. It's not PNP. PNP is the big park that's over here to the side. Again, Mr. Dickens cannot tell which property he's on or how to read a map. This is a simple skill he lacks. Let's continue. Back to the notice of violation. Again, this is basically just a form letter. They're going to tell you you have to comply. And again, he comes down here. Now, this is written on May the 29th of 2015, and I demonstrated to you that according to the state of Texas, he is still a code officer in training, but yet he is referring to himself as an Austin code officer here on the document. And Director Smarts lets them get away with all of this. In fact, what is it you say about all of your people, Carl?
Yeah, I expected some of the best trained actually as far as code enforcement officers in the state.
Okay, let's get along with the violation report here. So, and this is Barney Fife stuff. Structure maintenance. First off, it's really not a structure. He is claiming that there's a violation of the Austin City Code, section wiring, 605.4. Well, that's wrong. It's a poor reference. Having to do a lot of research, it should have read 25-12-213, section 605.04, wiring. And this is what that section says. Description of a violation. Flexible cords, including extension cords, should not be used for permanent wiring or running through the doors, windows, cabinets, or concealed walls within the floor, ceilings, unless specifically approved by the cord manufacturer. Pretty generic stuff. You can't use an extension cord oh, wait a minute, that's exactly what they did over at the fire station. These are photos from another segment I have on Todd Wilcox. This is Fire Station 37. Toward the end of my career, I went over to this fire station to work and ran across this. The firefighters had actually used an extension cord, came up through the ceiling, across the ceiling and down the cabinet, and then plugged it into the wall. You can't do that. This is exactly what they accused the homeowner of over here, except it wasn't inside of a building. It was actually outside, just an extension cord up a tree. Again, for the dryer, they took a big thick piece of Romex, went up through the ceiling, used a bunch of duct tape and turned it onto the vent for the dryer. Came across this column right here, and they came across here zip tied it onto the Romex cable, onto the bar joist. Here you see it onto the bar joist. Their destination was this 220 volt heater up here. This is the junction box that cut off for the heater, and they just popped into the bottom of it and scabbed electricity off of this. Again, the circuit breaker that was on was set for the heater and not designed to run a dryer, but what the hell, it's just the city of Austin. That's the way they do business. Go after the little guy and look the other way. When I turned this in initially, a division manager for the code department said, "Oh, that's a county building," and just closed the case. So back to this. It wasn't permanent wiring. And he recommended that within 14 days, they remove the extinction cord. He used the word extinction like it's a dinosaur, misspelled it. Again, this is the guy that we have coming out onto the property. Let's take a look at exactly what was going on here. And again, this extension cord, not extinction cord, was powering a surveillance camera. It was powering a surveillance camera because this homeowner had no less than 10 visits from the Austin Code Department for things like this in 1 year. So he had to put a camera up to catch these people coming and going from his property when he wasn't home. This is what the extension cord looked like. Yeah, here's the vile thing here. It's an extension cord that went up into a tree that was powering a security camera, a temporary hookup, because he had people coming onto his property. It's not permanent wiring. Another inspector actually looked at it and said it wasn't permanent wiring. Let me show you that. Okay, this is a previous inspection by a different. This is one of the ones that I've talked about. On May 8th, a young man by the name of Luis Gonzalez came onto the property. And again, this is really a nightmare for this homeowner. No wonder he put an extension cord up. But on 5/8, on initial inspection on May the 7th, it was recorded in the log on the 8th. May the 7th, Mr. Gonzalez observed an orange extension cord leading from the home at 3606 Grant Street to an adjacent tree where the owner had mounted a camera. And this inspector states the extension cord is not permanent and is plugged into an outlet. This inspector says it's not permanent, and if it's not permanent, then how can Mr. Dickens cite this part of the code and claim that it's being used as permanent wiring? Shall not be used for permanent wiring. It's an extension cord. It's just like a Christmas decorations, something you put up for a short period of time. Now you've got a rookie citing a structural maintenance issue and referring to a section of the code that deals with the inside of a property, not an extension cord going into a tree doing a camera. And he's given him 14 days to comply with this, or he's going to file criminal charges on him. This is the danger zone. You've got rookies out there making things up that don't understand the code, just trying to make it look good for themselves. Again, he's on LinkedIn, all over the place, telling everybody he's an officer. He's flexing his muscles. He's making this stuff up. And he says, oh, you can appeal this. You can go to a board or commission. You shouldn't have to do any of this. Now, the next thing he says, the type of violation is land use. He cites the Austin Code, the building permit required. He has a code there. He claims that the violation is a residential construction performed without permits, 3 decks attached, totaling 384 square feet of platform. Date observed is 5/29/15. And he gives them 14 days. Again, obtain a building permit for the deck addition. Okay, so he doesn't know what an extension cord is. Let me show you what the code says about what is the definition of a deck. Okay, this is the land development code. And all of our codes, usually in the very front section or somewhere around the front, there's going to be a section that defines things so it makes it very clear so there's no misunderstanding. Balcony exterior, a base flood, all these things here. What is a bed and breakfast? What is a deck? Now, again, I just cut and paste this out. I didn't want to put all of them on here. A deck is an exterior floor supported on at least two opposing sides by an adjacent structure and or post, piers, or other independent supports. So that's exactly what you think a deck is, right? Something that comes off the side of your house, the back of your house, and it's got a couple of posts in the ground that's holding the thing up, steps that leading it down. That's the definition of a deck. Now, what do you think he wrote up this owner for? Are you ready for this? Ta-da! Here is the alleged deck that this owner was written up for. This is basically a platform on the ground. It's not being supported by a structure. It's not being supported by any legs or any post. This guy's got a young daughter and she likes to dance, so he built this little platform less than 6 inches off the ground. It's a 2x6, so it's 5¼ inches, and so less than 7 inches tall. Not attached to anything, not being supported by anything, but he was written up for a code violation and told that he had 14 days to get a permit for this. Again, Mr. Dickens does not understand the code. And in fact, the owner told me he had to cut this down so it wasn't any more than 200 square feet. So the owner, fearing that he was having to go into court, took a chainsaw to this thing and cut it up when he didn't have to get a permit for it. Let's see what he did next. All right, so you just saw the 3 decks. There was 384 square feet. The owner had to cut them down to under 200 square feet. And, you know, if you go down to the permit office and say, hey, I need a permit for this, they're going to laugh at you. They should be laughing at the code inspector, trainee. So property abatement. So this is the low-hanging fruit on the tree. Now, you saw the picture. This guy has 2 lots, and he wanted him to mow the property. You have to maintain your property in a sanitary condition, okay? And then he wants to remove the used lumber from the ground to prevent harborage of rodents and remove a door that was up against a fence. This is just crazy. This is the kind of stuff that they want to screw with people for. Tall grass and weeds. You saw the area. He probably had some tall grass off to the side, and they said, oh, wait a minute, you're in violation over here. All 3 of these things were bogus. Let me show you a City of Austin property, another City of Austin business partner, and I've turned this in lots of times, and the city refuses to do anything about this. Let's take a look at the Yellow Bike Project. So this is a business partner for the City of Austin. It's the Yellow Bike Project, and you can see it's got tall grass and weeds around it all over the backside. They've got an old Frito-Lay truck parked over here back behind the corner. Little RV, you can't have that. But this is what their property looks like. This is the adjacent property, the City of Austin Electric Utility Yard. You can see silt fencing down, trash and debris all over the place. This is inside of Yellow Bike Project. You can see lumber. You can see things stashed all over the place. Here's the lumber, like they were talking about, harboring rodents. And I'm standing in an elementary school taking these photos. The City of Austin refuses to have their business partner clean up their stuff, but yet they want to take this other landowner and take him to court and threaten him with violations because they can't. So here we're back again. They wanted to remove the lumber from the ground to prevent the harborage of rodents and all these other things. And see, how many days? They gave him 14 days to do that too. So here's the danger zone. Failure to correct. They're going to subject you to fines of $2,000 a day in municipal court if you don't comply within 14 days. Civil penalties. Again, administrative hearings, another $1,000 a day per violation. He had 3 violations. That's $3,000 a day or $6,000 a day if you don't jump through the hoops and do what this rookie, non-educated, poorly trained inspector what have you do. Oh, then they'll file civil injunctions and state penalty. And some of the other paperwork talks about, hey, we're going to shut off your electricity and do all kinds of fun stuff. Oh, you can file a complaint within 3 days about your code officer, but no later. This is a joke. And who's responsible?
I'd like to see eliminations of the untrained inspectors. I believe you have a number of code inspectors that haven't been properly trained. How many code inspectors do you have now?
We're around 64 inspectors. I have to check to be sure of that exact number. But our inspectors,
more than that.
Yeah, our inspectors are some of the best trained actually as far as code enforcement officers in the state. So
well, they're inspectors. They're not officers, right? I think that is an important distinction.
They
They're
are
inspectors.
registered. Yeah, they are registered with the state as code enforcement officers.